And we are recording on Thursday, February 29th, 2024 at 12:04 p.m. Eastern Time, with Miss Clare Lopez and Miss Mitzi Perdue. And for everyone wondering, Mitzi is a huge fan, perhaps Claire's biggest fan. Always texts me when she's on, always leaves a note in the comments. And I don't know what I don't know, I don't know why, just perhaps my head's as empty as it seems to be. It just bounced around for 3 years, and finally I was like, well, how come I haven't had her on a show with Claire yet? Because you actually have been to Ukraine several times since the war broke out, almost 2 years or a little over 2 years ago. And the last one ended with what we believe to be a poison attempt on you.
Oh
But
no.
yeah, before that, I was gonna say, Miss Claire Lopez, can you give us any updates on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and then we can tie in Miss Mitzi Perdue's travels there?
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, Tommy, for bringing us together, and Mitzi for coming on the show together with us. It's a great idea.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, yeah, I mean, as far as Ukraine goes, the latest is that the United States government has really slow walked our assistance to Ukraine, and it's reaching a very critical point right now at the end of the winter over there, which lasts longer than winter here. Um, very difficult fighting conditions, and the delay in Congress approving funding for Ukraine has put them in a very difficult position. And the Russians have made some at least tactical level advances on especially the city, the town of Avdiivka, down in Donetsk province, also in western Zaporizhia. I shouldn't say province, oblast, they would say. Zaporizhia Oblast too. And so things have uh, ground to, in a way, a bit of a standoff, a little bit of tactical movement this way, that way. But I know that Europeans have recently approved new packages of assistance, funding, and weapons for Ukraine, which will definitely help. But we need to get the U.S. Congress moving here.
What is the what is the what is the holdup? What is the limitation?
Well, what happened is that the Republican side of the House of Representatives, which has the slimmest margin of a majority in the House of Representatives, um, put together a mixed bag package of funding that included Ukraine and for Israel and for the U.S. border, and I think Taiwan as well, all four bundled into the same package, in the hope that they might get it all through together, because the Democrat side of the House and eventually the Senate um, want want some of that, but not all of that. It was a crazy idea, in my opinion. Bills, in my opinion, and I've heard Speaker Mike Johnson say this as well. Um, Packages of funding ought to be, and bills ought to be standalone.
Hmm.
One topic, one bill. And as I understand, over the next couple of weeks, they're going to move about 12 appropriations bills, each of which is a standalone subject of its own. And
Okay.
you call that regular order. That's what they ought to be doing. They did not do it in this case. And so the overall big spending package did not get through, and that means that the Ukraine funding, as well as the others, have been held up.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. I think everyone is pretty universally uh distrustful of omnibus bills, where it's, hey, we're gonna send funding here, and then it's also part of the anti-puppy hate group. And if you don't like this, then you hate puppies, and that's kind of, I think, the way they've always tied it in. But to kind of tie that into, Mitzi, I think your first and second trips. Could you tie that into, in terms of just general aid to Ukraine? I mean, you went there and you helped with it. I believe it was the police stations, correct?
Yeah, my particular expertise comes from who invited me to come. I had written a story for Psychology Today about human trafficking on the border between Poland and Ukraine. And by huge good luck from my point of view, the head of police for Kyiv region had written his master's thesis on human trafficking. And so my article in Psychology Today made its way to General Nebitov, who on a Zoom said, I agree with what you said, but it's so much worse. Why don't you come and see for yourself, be our guest? So that means that the entire lens through which I view Ukraine is from a police point of view. And that happens to be very important and not widely covered because the police are responsible for documenting war crimes. So I got to see and interview a whole lot of people who've been victims of war crimes. And then I also learned something that I think is not widely known. Claire, you may know it, but part of Putin's playbook for every country he invades is one of the first things he does is he attacks the police. He has a murder list because he'll know, say in Bucha, he'll know all the police. He'll have lists of all the people who could resist. And so as I stipulated, my view of what's going on in Ukraine is through the context that the police have put me through.
Hmm. Did you touch on that, Claire? And yeah, I didn't know that, but I suppose that does make sense. You would want to cause as much disruption and chaos as you could. That's exactly what you do. You would either release the prisoners, or you would destroy the current group holding law and order.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
no,
if I could
that's
just
the
jump in and
exact.
say, may I jump in for a moment? One of the things that has happened in the areas where they do destroy the police, uh, the cartels just move in, and since the police aren't going to stop them, the rapes, looting, murder. It's not just the Russians; it's the bad elements of society anyway. It's a twofer as far as the Russians are concerned. Your aim is to demoralize the population, get rid of the police.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Claire.
Yeah, no, this is exactly from the Soviet communist playbook, and it's repeated in every place. I mean, certainly in Ukraine, absolutely. And just as Mitzi said, to destabilize society, to get rid of those elements of society that maintain law and order, the police. Um, but this happens everywhere. This obviously happened in Mao's China. It happened in Castro's Cuba. Any place that communism is allowed to make inroads, this is what happens.
Yeah, the slow disintegration. And kind of come back to it then, uh Claire, how is this going to keep playing out? I mean, what will be the either the breaking point and or the negotiation point between Russia and Ukraine? Like how far does this keep going, or is this a symptom? Is this a broader symptom of escalation all over the world? We obviously talked about Gaza and Israel and the Houthis in Iran and China and Taiwan, and how it seems to be an increasingly escalating. Are we is the pressure just dialing up all over the world, and the
Well,
gaskets are just
this is
popping
what I would
off?
say. I mean, absolutely good observation, Tommy, because what I would say is that when American leadership, influence, and power are absent from the world, chaos ensues. And that's what we're seeing now in the third year on plus of the Biden administration. When there is weakness in Washington D.C., in particular 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, um, those in the world that want to take advantage of that. That's exactly what's happening. As far as in Ukraine, um, the Ukrainian people are going to fight for their land, for their liberty, for their independence. If they have to go down to pitchforks, they will not stop until they liberate their land. It is their land that was invaded. It is on their land that Russia is committing war crimes every single day. And they have the right to stand up for their own national sovereignty and every inch of their sovereign territory as recognized by the United Nations. So I know that the Europeans, as I mentioned before, are beginning to step up with new aid packages, weapons, and funding. I'm hopeful that at some point the United States and our Congress will, get moving and pass the appropriations that are in the pipeline, to assist Ukraine. And here's a point: when other countries provide aid to Ukraine, sometimes that's weapons and sometimes that's funding. When the United States has been providing assistance to Ukraine, the overwhelming majority of that is weapons and other, ammunition and things that go along with that for the war effort. And what that does is actually redounds to the benefit of Americans, because what happens is that Congress appropriates the money, and the Ukrainians have submitted their wish list, their shopping list, if you will, and then the U.S. companies like Raytheon and Boeing and Martin Marietta and whatever else bid to provide that part of the weapons package that that they do, and so that brings jobs to America, preserves jobs in America, brings funding to American companies and workers, and then the weapons get shipped over there. It's not like, shrink wrapped pallets of $100 bills like we send to the mullahs or to the Taliban. No, 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 no. To Ukraine, it's mainly weapons that come out of American factories made by American workers.
And one of the things that I know, being connected with the police, is the police are very interested in tracking like the bot farms that are spreading disinformation. And if we want to go into that more, I'd love to tell what I know from the police point of view. But on the point of view of weapons, one of the major efforts, and I'd love, Claire, for you to elaborate on this, but we know what messages the Russians are trying to have for disinformation. To, the overall goal is to make us pull back and just think our money is wasted. But I also know, and I know this from the police, that this may be the most carefully documented inventory of every gun. It's got a
Oh,
QR
yeah.
code.
Yeah.
I mean, you can ask your local your congressman or senator. They've got records of everything. This may be the most tightly controlled inventory that's ever been. But the Russians, way high up in their list of disinformation efforts is to make us think, oh, money is going to, it'll be sold on the Turkish equivalent of eBay, and it's going to finance some oligarch's condo in Dubai. No, that's total disinformation.
Yeah, exactly so. And I'd point our viewers, our listeners, to a Facebook page. I may have mentioned this before, Tommy, probably on your show. But together with Trevor Loudon and Jeff Nyquist, I have joined with them on a Facebook page called Conservatives for Ukraine. Conservatives numeral for Ukraine. And that's on Facebook. And we regularly post articles and op-ed pieces and information like you're giving us here, Mitzi, to try to to steer the conversation in a factual direction and oppose the info ops that are being spewed out of the Kremlin, unfortunately, to great effect, and especially when the KGB, well, I still call it the KGB, are able to recruit, wittingly or unwittingly, major conservative voices, like a Tucker Carlson, like a Jack Posobiec, who probably don't realize and would never in their wildest dreams want to be willingly working for the Kremlin. No, but they don't realize what's happening, or how they have been lured into, roped into becoming mouthpieces for the Kremlin, which is unfortunately what's happened. But when they get, an outlet, a mouthpiece with that kind of reach, that kind of influence, that's a major coup. And to your point, Missy, about all the bots, not just bots, but major, sources of mis and disinformation, that we have to recognize is coming out of the Kremlin.
Well, let me share with you again from the police point of view. I'm in contact probably every other day, at least by Zoom, with people in Ukraine, most often police. But their take on the Tucker broadcast,
Mhm.
that the
The
Russians
interview,
are,
you mean, with Putin?
the interview with Putin, that the Russians are extraordinarily good at being able to say he said 7 words. You take 5 words and leave out 2, and you give the impression that Tucker is saying, I'm speaking for all America. And that this is used domestically in Russia to just assure people that real Americans love Russia. And there's no qualifiers to it. They say that the propaganda coup that Tucker did is catastrophic beyond imagination, because with the ability to slant things and leave things out, uh, it's just worse than we in the West might easily imagine. And while we're on disinformation, I have heard, and I don't know if we know, but that Russia spends $1.3 billion a year on disinformation. My view on this, and again, I just love comment from somebody more knowledgeable than me, but I've come up with my personal conclusion that disinformation is far more dangerous to us than nuclear warheads,
Yeah.
because if you're Russia, you probably don't want to use the nuclear warheads because you're going to be incinerated. It's not a good deal. On the other hand, what constraints are there to keep you from using all the disinformation you can? And you
Well, and they're past masters at it. I mean, this has been going on since the time, of the SARS, really, more than 100 years ago and beyond. They're very, very good at this stuff, and we are not good at this stuff. Partly, it's just not. It's not in our wheelhouse either to be good at recognizing disinformation or countering it, or even putting out some of our own aimed back at the other direction. We're just not good at this stuff. And they are very, very good at this stuff.
Well, all of a sudden, this conversation is becoming super exciting to me, because I've been invited with 2 senators, they're retired, but who see it the same way that you just described, Claire, that they're very, very good at it. And we, first of all, most of us hardly know that it's happening,
Yeah.
and we don't counteract it. And I believe Voice of America, the information service, the VO, whatever,
Yeah.
that just hasn't been highly active.
Well,
So,
and Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe, not what they used to be back in the time, even of the Cold War.
Hmm.
well, when I said that I'm getting excited by this conversation, uh, maybe our listeners would like to contact me and be put in touch with an organization that's fundraising right now and is working with I don't think I can say who they are quite yet, but major names that we all know, to try to influence Russian opinion, to try to have a backfire of some sort against this deluge that's coming. And so can I put in my email?
Yes, you can.
I'll do it anyway, Mitzi@MitziPerdue.com. If this topic interests you, I can put you in touch with a groundswell of people who recognize the problem and want to do something about it. And
It's,
if
I was
I
gonna say
may,
it's Perdue. It's Perdue.
yeah, Mitzi, Mitzi, at MitziPerdue.com.
Yeah.
And I have a sensitivity to this because, again, my police connections, I'm aware of and have talked with the people who are involved in it. The way the bot farms work, you say one that was recently disrupted right near Kyiv. They found the Ukrainian police found 3,000 SIM cards. Those are the things that identify you as a unique user of that phone.
Mhm.
Okay, 3,000 SIM cards, each of one gives itself a separate identity as a Ukrainian. And each of those SIM cards is capable of sending out 500 a day messages. And here's where they're going to go. And tell me if this is new to you. It was brand new to me. A large part of them will do things like YouTube,
Yeah. Yeah.
The things that
No,
we
not new to me at all.
okay,
You
but maybe
probably know my background.
oh
You
yes,
know,
of course, and I do know your background.
so I guess I do have, some advantage over those who've not had that background. They pursued other professional careers, but because of that background of mine, this is all very familiar, and as well because I've been following events with the Chinese Communist Party as well.
Well, for those who aren't familiar with it, imagine that you have something sort of anti-Putin. They can mobilize countless people to vote it down. Or it's something that's pro-Russia, they can mobilize people looking as if they're coming from Ukraine to vote it up.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
You know how the
that
Chinese
powerful.
have got their 50-cent army? Heard of that maybe?
I
It's a
have.
similar concept. 50-cent army are those individuals working for the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, who get the equivalent, I guess, of 50 cents per social media message that they put out. That's where that comes from, the 50-cent army. Same thing in Russia, um, and operating now in Ukraine, of course. So, Mitzi, count me in to help your effort. We should talk some more.
I think you'll be
Afterwards.
impressed by the people who are part of it.
I'd be glad to join
They're
in and lend my
seven.
efforts to yours and theirs.
This is very exciting. And everybody else, you're included too. Come join us, because if there's a threat that's more consequential than nuclear arms or nuclear weapons, and we're not defending against it, it's
It's
we start.
5G warfare. This is fifth generation warfare, which is information warfare. That's essentially what 5G warfare is. It's information warfare, propaganda, information operations. And as I said, others are very much better at that than we are.
Hmm. I was gonna say, I actually still haven't watched the Tucker interview, but just given my own kind of experience with censorship, I tend to not really have a problem with him in it because I have to practice what I preach, and it's put the information out there and let the person decide for themselves, like interviewing a Dr. McCullough or something. The odd thing about him is the consistency. It's like the same people that said Donald Trump's going to wreck the economy and cause World War III, and then now it's if it happens under Biden, nobody cares. It is an odd thing in that I did see his bit about the Russian grocery store, and it's
Oh,
just
yeah. And the metro.
but
Remember,
in
don't
terms of
forget the metro.
just flat out consistency, and this is what gets me is again you criticize something under Donald Trump, but you vote under Biden, or vice versa. It's an odd thing when you have this guy pointing out how much better, and it's like, aren't isn't socialism and communism, isn't that the kind of proverbial big bad boogeyman, especially for the right? And you have Tucker sitting here pointing out how good everything is there, and no one bats an eye. They go, yeah, Tucker is, and
Well,
say that
I
any
mean,
other time, and you'd be a sympathizer to socialists. It's just,
yeah, here's the problem. I mean, yes, when Tucker was on Fox, he was not a straight up journalist. He was a talk show host who
yeah,
is
I get
supposed to
that,
be providing opinions.
I
But
get that.
for a long time, couple of years before he left Fox, um,
Excuse me.
uh, his opinions on Russia's invasion of Ukraine were skewed in favor of Putin's aggression and invasion of Ukraine. And so when he went over there to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin, he was not going as
Oh, sure, no, I get
a
that.
neutral journalist. Yeah, yeah, he has every right to go. He is a journalist. He has every right to go and interview him. Absolutely. Why not? But understand that he went there with uh, a record of public pronouncements that favored Russia and Putin, and he was viewed that way very much so
Yeah,
by Russia and by Putin, which basically, Putin, who basically just, filibustered the entire interview and just rolled poor Tucker.
oh,
Um,
sure.
by
No,
filibustering essentially, half an hour lesson on history to begin with which, obviously from Tucker's furrowed brow, he had not done his homework. He
yeah,
did not know the history of the Ukrainian people, the Russians, where they came from, what was the history of these lands. He had no idea. And
yeah.
so obviously, Putin, who's steeped in these things, through school from first grade on, had the advantage, as well as, being an old KGB
Y-
officer.
Yeah, no, no, I'm with you entirely. Just personally, I kind of be, for me, it's let Tucker say whatever it is he's going to say for one of two reasons, or at least two reasons. One, I just free flow of information and adults can decide.
Hmm.
But two, even if someone goes over there and they show themselves to be a dummy or gullible, I look at it and I go, well, that's good too, because you at least, it's like when someone goes on, Joe Rogan, it's either they can get the information out or you see themselves as a propaganda.
Well,
When
but
I,
the problem is how many of the viewers, and I
oh,
gather
sure,
there were like millions who watched that interview, how many of them, actually perceived what was actually going on between Putin and Tucker?
I think I
I
can guarantee
suspect
a
some of
very
them may
small.
not have realized what Putin was doing.
sure.
I bet you most didn't. And then what about the audience in Russia or Ukraine, where
That
it's
too.
just going to be
Yeah.
so demoralizing to the Ukrainians, sort of to hear that everybody agrees with Tucker.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
mean,
No, I
it's
agree with that.
terrific.
But I look at something like Dr. Sanjay Gupta going on Rogan, and there are people that are like, oh, he's gonna push vaccine propaganda. And I think most people, and it took time, but most people you can now look back, you look at Sanjay Gupta and they go, he looks stupid. He looks stupid peddling these. So again, I think that just comes from like a personal point of,
Hmm.
those who are going to have the wool pulled over their eyes were going to have it pulled over by the next person willing to sell them something. I think in general, for me at least, and it might be idyllic and I could be very wrong. And in 10 years, I look back at me and go, I was a stupid 33-year-old. But I tend to think just get it out there and I think people will be able to
Well,
decide for
okay,
themselves.
eventually,
Yeah.
yeah. But the war is now.
Oh, sure.
Ukraine's
Oh,
And the
sure.
survival is up
voting
in the air now.
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
and the voting on funding is now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I again,
So it matters
like I said, I
a
could
lot right now.
like I kept a journal in college, and I look back at it, and that was when I was 23. I'm 33 now. I look at it and I just shake my head, and I'm like, God, you were dumber than I ever thought was possible.
No, you weren't
Well,
dumber. You were
but
22.
well,
That's
my
all.
point
What were
is
we at, when we were 22?
my point is I have no problem with the idea that I could be incorrect, but that's my 2 cents. Is just, I'm kind of more from my own experiences with this podcast. I am more of an absolutist where I'm like, no, just let it fly. But I've also lived a life in the United States, and I've never, if I ask Dale these things, who's in Delta Force, he might tell me I'm a moron. He's fought in
No, no, no,
97
not
countries.
at all.
But that's my
It's just
disclaimer.
that the purpose of disinformation, desinformatia in Russian, I think Ukrainian too, um, is to have an immediate impact, is to have an
Sure.
impact on the war right now, the war of Ukrainians for their survival, the war in the West, for funding, for understanding the war, for understanding, which side we're going to be on, the Westphalian nation, sovereign nation state system, or a globalist system led by the Putins and the Xis of the world, together with the World Economic Forum and so forth, in which borders mean nothing, and warlords and neo empirical would-be czars, rampage across the landscape with none to defend, the invaded. It matters right now. That
Sure.
is what information operations does in the real time, and that's why it's important. I think, in particular, this be countered now.
Sure.
And they have such a fire hose approach to it. I mean, the sheer amounts of it. Uh, and I've been talking with, again, my source is police, but one of kind of the efforts that the Russian have is with this fire hose approach to disinformation is, some of it's going to take, some of it's not, but they have the first mover advantage because when you hear,
Yeah.
I'll take a case example. I have a lot of people I know a lot of people in the Christian community who absolutely believe at this moment that Zelensky is anti-Christian and he's closing churches right and left. The little bit that's correct is, he's closed some Russian Orthodox churches that were Putin's spies, but
Exactly.
that's not what the Russians' propaganda that reaches the Christian community. I've really talked with quite a few people on this because it interests me greatly. I can tell them that this is Russian propaganda. I can tell the other side that I've personally been in possibly 20 churches and seen the congregants and the enthusiasm. No, the churches aren't closed, but I try to tell them that. And to them, it's not what they believe. The first mover advantage is the first thing you hear is the one that you tend to believe. And it's very hard to change anybody's mind if you're not the
Well,
first.
and they don't know the history of Soviet Russia and how the KGB co-opted the Russian Orthodox Church and its branches elsewhere, outside of the Soviet Union, outside of Russia, to include in Ukraine. Why does Zelensky go after and close down the Russian Orthodox churches? Because they are co-opted by, used by extensions of the KGB.
Well,
But
then allow me to jump in.
the churches that he champions and keeps open are the Ukrainian Orthodox churches, which have now shifted their, I guess, their allegiance to the patriarchy in Turkey.
I want to jump in and make another comment again from my police sources. They of course, since they're part of defending against the disinformation, they study it, life and death. But one of the things about the Ukrainians and the church, the Ukrainians know this about the Russians. The Russians study our psychology as hard and fast as they can, and they know that our attitude, we in the West, we expect there to be like a mirroring of where in the United States there's a separation of church and state. So the Russians just totally play on that with our inability to understand that, as you were pointing out, Claire, that the Russians co-opt the church. We in the West think that church and state are separate. So it's hard for us to process.
Well, and they don't know that there's a split, between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. These are separate branches. And whereas the Ukrainians used to look to Moscow and the Patriarch Kirill for their affiliation, once they realized how the KGB was infiltrating, and trying to co-opt the Ukrainian church, they separated and they disband, they separated from their their allegiance to Moscow, to that patriarchy. The other thing that Americans do is, just as you're saying, Mitzi, is kind of a mirror imaging, right? We think that the Orthodox Church, be it Moscow, be it even Kiev, is some kind of, a mirror image of those nice Methodists and Presbyterians down the street. Well, they're not. That's not what that's like over there. It's a different thing. Our good friend Trevor Loudon, I think, put it to me in a very good explanation at one point. He said for Russians in particular, but say for the Slavic population and the Orthodox churches, plural, it's a blood and soil kind of thing. For the Russians, it's of Chekhov and Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, as much as it is for any Christian doctrine that might be prevalent in American, let's say, Protestant churches. It's not the same thing. Yes, it's Christianity, but that is an older those are older branches of Christianity to begin with, and much more closely tied to concepts of blood and soil, of nationhood, of empire even, than Americans probably are able to understand.
Mitzi.
Well, I was just thinking of churches that I visited, and I'm more religious now than I've ever been because I saw the consolation that the church provides. Oh, let me describe one experience. I was in a monastery near Kiev, one of the oldest in Ukraine. And the Russians, when it's near Kiev, but not in Kiev, but there was a rather brief period where the Russians took over this particular town where this church is. And they painted the church, they've restored it, but the church has, the walls are not painted in, when I think of an image in a Western church, it's usually a framed thing that you hang. No, in
Oh,
this case, the walls are
yeah,
painted with frescoes.
frescoes. Yeah.
The Russians just went in and painted it all over with a vomit colored green to hide all the beauty, and then made it available for like a nightclub.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
just desecrating as hard and fast as they could. Now, what does that do to the soul of somebody who's
Sure.
grown, up, maybe been
Yeah.
baptized, maybe been married, and the utter desecration? I
Yeah.
think personally, I think it fortifies their fury, but it's sure designed to demoralize. The things
You
that you
know,
hold most sacred are, I mean,
yeah.
turn into a dance hall bar. What?
I spent a couple of years serving at the U.S. Embassy in Sofia in Bulgaria. Traveled all over the country and saw many of the same type of old churches, chapels, monasteries, and they too there have the tradition of painting the walls in these frescoes of Jesus and Mary and the saints and different scenes from the Bible, that kind of thing. But here's what the interesting thing what the Bulgarians did. We may know that the jihadist Ottoman Turks conquered southeastern Europe and ruled over Bulgaria and many of the other surrounding areas for 500 and plus years. There's actually a book, Pod Igato. Pod Igato is Bulgarian. It means under the yoke for 500 years. So what the Bulgarians did, they knew that the Turks, the jihadis of the Ottoman Empire, would desecrate their frescoes and had done so. And what they did is they got ahead of them and they covered them over with plaster, white
Wow.
plaster.
How
And it didn't
beautiful.
harm the frescoes underneath. And eventually, after, as it was Tsar Alexander II of Russia in 1878 who actually helped the Bulgarians win their freedom from the Turks, and the Turks were gone. They could remove the
Hmm.
plaster, and the frescoes underneath show the colors as fresh and beautiful as the day they were painted.
That's
They knew how
Awesome.
to preserve them that way.
one of
So
my
Awesome.
many of these.
Awesome.
one of my close friends is Ivan. He's from Sofia, Bulgaria. But yeah, isn't that something that ISIS did? Isn't the kind of that is a
Well, yeah,
tactic, right? Is you erase the culture.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you desecrate, gouge out the
Yeah.
the facial figures of the the saints and Mary and Jesus and so forth in these because for them, of course, under Islamic ideology, this is all blasphemy.
Mm.
To
Um.
to 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 show um, images, painted or drawn or otherwise, photographs even of images of people. That's why in a an Islamic mosque, you will never ever see images, photographs, paintings, or anything else of people, even like of Muhammad. What you'll see are intricate geometric designs, maybe plants, sort of in a decorative design around the upper parts of the walls of the mosque, that sort of thing. But no people, no animals.
Why is that?
That's because that's blasphemy to show a
Uh.
living creature for them. Under Islamic doctrine, it
Sure.
is blasphemy to show an image of a living being,
Gotcha. Um.
animal or human.
To
or the divine either.
yeah. To
I mean,
pivot
never mind the Sistine Chapel. Forget that.
yeah. To pivot back to the absence of, even with, removing police chiefs in Ukraine, and then you have the cartels run wild. I mean, that is a microcosm of the macrocosmic kind of theorem, not theorem, but natural law that nature abhors a vacuum. Power will always find its way in. Um, to go from there to, an absence of United States power, what is, and I know we talked about it earlier with the omnibus bill, but what is the holdup then? I mean, if we're looking at Ukraine, if we're looking at Israel, if we're looking at Taiwan, we're looking at is
Because it
the
was
fact of the
all jumbled
border.
together. It was all
Okay.
jammed together into one big bill. And, different factions of House of Senate in the United States opposed or supported different parts of it, but would not vote for the whole thing.
I have heard,
Gotcha.
and I would love clarification on this. There's context to my question. I'm living in New York right now. I've lived here close to a month. I also spend some time in Texas with my son, and the difference between how Texans view
Oh,
Trump versus uh, how people in New York view him. What this is a Claire question, but where does Trump stand on Ukraine? Here in New York,
yeah,
I I know Republicans who are changing their parties because they're so mad at Trump because they say he's going to
yeah.
sell uh, Ukraine down the drain. Uh, what's the
Trump's instincts are of course expressed in his signature I don't know, motto, MAGA, make America great again, or America first. And we can all, I think, identify with that. But his tendencies sometimes, in particular with regard to Ukraine or the Middle East, even not necessarily Israel per se, put that aside, but the Middle East more broadly, his instincts are to pull back American troops. In any case, American troops on the ground. That is his tendency, his instinct, and it's part of America first. But what I would love to be able to maybe suggest to him and his advisors, or be one of his advisors, is that when we actively support and defend liberty elsewhere in the world, not every single place, but certainly a large, important European country that is looking westward, like Ukraine, when we help to defend liberty there, we in the end protect our own freedom at home. And that is because I think we, and I'm expecting many of our watchers, our listeners, support the Westphalian sovereign nation state system. We value that, we support that, but it doesn't defend itself, and it's going to be challenged by these would-be warlords. And, hearkening back to Tsarist times, neo-imperial, aggressors like Putin, or further east, go to a Xi Jinping. Neither China nor Russia is a country per se. Each one of those is an empire of conquered people, multiple conquered people. China, the Manchurians, the Mongols, the Cantonese, Hong Kong more recently, Tibet, the Uyghurs. These were not, willingly associating themselves with Chinese empire. They were forcibly conquered. It's the same thing in Russia. I don't know how many nationalities are there. Conquered people. That's what those places are. And so when we defend the nation state, it doesn't mean, that we ignore our own southern border, which we should not, of course. Every bit this applies to our border as to anybody else's border. I don't know why we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. But in any case, what we're defending when we stand up for liberty, for freedom for the Ukrainian people, not only are we helping them to defend their own sovereign nation state, their own freedom and liberty, we help hold the line between the free world and tyranny. between an expansionist Putin, Kremlin, Russia, and NATO, because just the other side, Western side of Ukraine, are NATO countries. The Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, not exactly on the border, but very close. On the border with Ukraine, Hungary, Poland, of course. Look what Putin's already doing right now in Moldova, in the Transnistria area,
Yeah.
on down Romania, Bulgaria, across the Black Sea. He's not going to stop. He has explicitly, and so have his senior people, like Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, or take the deputy head of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev. They've explicitly, over and over again, said out loud that their ambitions do not stop with Ukraine. They take Ukraine, they will go on, and they've named Poland, they've named the Baltics explicitly. So we defend all of that, and eventually, hopefully, by stopping this aggression, at the border of Ukraine and Russia, we make it more likely, that NATO itself will not be directly drawn into this, even though, of course, we all support Ukraine now, but from the other side of the border, the other side of the western side of Ukraine's border. If Putin takes Ukraine, defeats Ukraine, then it is right up against NATO. Then we're in it. Then we're really in it by obligation. So I think that's the broader view that I would want to express, that we're defending a sovereign nation state system. I've heard it called the international order sometimes. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, terms it like that. And that's the kind of world we want to live in. Sovereign nation states with defended borders. And that does mean our own as well as Ukraine's.
And my feeling is, standing up against against Russia right now, I think Russia is spectacularly weaker than we give them credit for. And you mentioned the nationalities. I've heard something like 130. I'm not going to be.
It's a lot. Yeah, I don't know the number either, but it's a lot.
It's over 100 in any case.
Yeah.
And again, sources in Ukraine tell me that if you're one of the disfavored minorities, your odds of dying in Ukraine are 40 times what they are if you were like from Moscow or St. Petersburg. And the Ukrainian the Russian ethnicities that aren't favored, they know it. And it seems to me that Putin is just on top of a tinder keg of furious people. I mean, you do not like to have your sons 40 times more likely to be killed than a favored minority. But other weaknesses that he has, just geopolitically, look around all the countries that touch Russia, with the possible exception, but I don't think I'll grant it exception status. Every one of them hates Russia, is scared of it. And the exception might be China. But I've had a theory for years as a journalist who's been in China 12 times and been on the border between Russia and China. The amount of enmity is spectacular. The Russians are mad. You don't read about this, and I haven't even written about it, but I've seen it. There are Russians in the border areas. Russian women tend to want to marry Chinese guys. And the reason why is because they're not alcoholic and they're not going to beat them and they have jobs. The Russian men hate this. So there's, just intense, at least in the border areas, anger at each other.
Yeah.
Then we all hear about China and Taiwan, but China still would like Vladivostok back. And there's an irredentist fervor for that I haven't heard talked about, but
people don't know this. They don't know the history.
But I know it. And if I were Chairman Xi, we're on the subject right now of what I take to be Russian weakness. If I were Chairman Xi and my economy is in peril, it's essential that I have some unifying external threat. And I
Mhm.
don't think it would be Taiwan, because they could lose
Well,
in Taiwan.
you
But
know,
with 1,000-kilometer border that's not easily defended, that would be a great distraction. I think Putin's going to
I
worry.
actually, huh?
Excuse me?
No, go ahead.
No, Claire,
Finish.
I defer to you in every possible case.
No, I was just going to add to exactly what you're saying there, Mitzi. I did my master's thesis on the economic
Siberia.
natural resources of Siberia. Yeah, many years
China
ago.
wants them and needs them. They don't have the fossil fuels. They don't have the mineral resources.
China, yeah, lacks oil, gas. You would think as big a country as it is, it would have everything, but it does not. But here's something very interesting, I think, to watch, and that's demographics, because both Russia and China are in a demographic death spiral. China's population, because of 36 years of murdering all their girl babies, born and unborn, does not have enough women. There are 30 to 40 million Chinese men who will never have a girlfriend, never have a wife, and no children. They call them in Mandarin bare branches. They will never blossom. By the by, maybe a good place to send them might be across our southern border. Get
Uh,
them out of the country. That many unwed, unhappy men. What are you going to do with them?
Mm.
But the point being here that Russia also is on a downward spiral, demographically speaking, and they do not now and will not in the future have the wherewithal to hang on to the huge, vast expanses of Siberia and all its wealth, oil, gas, timber, furs, minerals, all of that. And indeed, in history past, China did actually own or occupy a good part of what is today Siberia, and as you say, right up onto the Pacific port of Vladivostok. And I suspect, depending on whose population crashes furthest first, um, I can see that China might be eyeing um, the kinds of natural resources they need up in Siberia. Will they have the wherewithal, the population, to take advantage of that or not? Don't know, but this bears watching too.
and one other thing that I heard when I was on the border between China and Russia, and I've never heard this anyplace else, but northern China tends to be a desert area. Lake Baikal is the largest freshwater lake in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese would absolutely, they've been negotiating for this and been turned down always. They would love to have a great big pipe from Lake Baikal
Mm-hmm.
to help
Yeah.
out China. And that's a source of contention because the Chinese have such need for it. The Russians are so totally refusing it. There's just instance after instance of where if, okay, I'm going to make a prediction, which I'm not entitled to do. I'm just a journalist, but if there's war, I don't think it's going to be Taiwan. I think it's going to be between Russia and China. And I also suspect that it's probably going on right now anyway, but so low level that it's not picked up.
Well, or maybe not actual outright military hostilities, but simply a kind of a oozing over the border by China
Encroaching.
if its population holds up long enough to do that.
Mm.
And that brings me as a journalist to another thing, since you've mentioned demographics. I'm not certain what I'm about to say is true, but I think I'm the one who broke the story of kidnapped Ukrainian children brought
Oh
over
yeah,
Russia.
thousands and thousands of them.
I will give you a statistic which nobody else uses, but I will share my resource. And this story, I wrote about it like a few months after the invasion because they started right off.
Mm-hmm.
General Nebitov, head of the Kyiv Region Police, he's now at a national level. He said that there were 100,000 children just early on. He said their approach was they know where the orphanages are, and they give whoever's the head of an orphanage a choice. you can let your children go with us to a nice, safe home in Russia, or we will make sure that no food or water enters your orphanage. And, what do you do?
Yeah.
And uh, I asked General Nebitov, because this was such a big story. I mean, the world, as far as I can tell, acknowledges that maybe there's 16,000. He said back like a year and a half ago that it was 100,000. And I said, "Are you sure of this?" And he said, "Yes, we have perfect records. We document war crimes. We have the records from the orphanages, and
And
they."
happily, though, I mean, there are organizations, both Ukrainian and other nationalities international, which are conducting rescue operations of these Ukrainian children inside Russia and getting them out, either through negotiations or whatever, but not nearly enough for the numbers that have been taken.
I'm doing a story right now. I'll be working on it this afternoon based on an interview with a 14-year-old girl. She was at her school, and she was told, "You and these kids get on this bus. You're going to go to a wonderful sports camp." She didn't want to do it. Her little 10-year-old brother was with her, by the way. She passionately didn't want to do it, but her calculation, she told me, was you refuse a request like this, and guys with machine guns may come calling on your parents and kill them. She got on the bus. She she was brought, I'm not sure if it was Belarus or she actually got into Russia, but eventually she was rescued. But she told me that the hardest part of the rescue, and she won't go into details of how the rescue was conducted, but the hardest part was her 10-year-old brother had been so brainwashed that when she was telling him what they had to do to leave this compound surreptitiously, he didn't want to do it because he was convinced that the Ukrainians were Nazis who would kill him.
Oh, geez. How about their parents?
Oh,
I mean,
it's
did they get reunited with their parents?
they did.
Okay. I mean, you
But
would
but
think
but
that
but
a
but
little boy would want to go home to his parents.
but what if he's been told that that Ukraine hates them, that Russia is rescuing them?
You'd
She,
still want to go home to mommy and daddy, wouldn't you?
if you're scared that Ukrainians are going to kill you, uh, eventually, I mean, he did go home to mommy and daddy, but this organization that made possible for me the interview, they've rescued 300. We now know, or at least I believe, that it's in the hundreds of thousands who've been kidnapped.
I know it's a lot. I don't know the number, but whatever it is,
Okay,
I know
I'm
that
going.
the Ukrainians are documenting everything and have taken a lot of this evidence already of different kinds of war crimes to The Hague, to the International Criminal Court at The Hague.
And they do such cool things with the police do that I don't think are widely known. But as an example, in Bucha, which is one of the like centers of war crimes, tell me if this isn't cool. There, there's a mass grave with 400 people in it. There are 13 cameras watching the exhumations and whatever police DNA or whatever it is that they do. This is being transmitted in real time to The Hague. So, the record of it is greater than has ever happened in human history. The war crimes are documented. Isn't it
Amazing.
cool?
That's
That,
very amazing. Yeah, good for them.
I
At
mean, I
some
love it.
point, this will be brought before the court. Maybe not right now, but it's being collected for the time when, this case will be brought. And already, of course, Putin himself, it has been, designated a wanted for arrest as a war criminal by the International Court at the Criminal Court at The Hague.
I think I guess my own, just thinking aloud, my own critique of myself, and I think Claire, you and I have talked about this before, or I've talked to you about it, is my gut reaction, right, and perhaps it's growing up and seeing 20 years of the war on terror. My gut reaction is always like, why are we involved? But then there's almost a sort of like grow up moment where it's like, how do you think the world operates? Like it's admittedly it's an idyllic thing to think that we can just pull back and not be involved. And it's you can point to history, you can point to Korea, you can point to Vietnam and be like, what did we get out of that? But another part of me thinks if I was, and perhaps this is I don't know, sympathy towards Biden or whoever's the president. Sometimes and it's also a dangerous precedent because you don't want to just say, oh well, we don't know what's going on. Another part of me thinks, if I was at the top and I saw everything, every bit of intel, I might look at it and go, you have to do this. And half the American people are going to hate you. And I think I've talked to you about that, Claire,
Yeah, I mean,
it
the
might be
thing
a
is,
moment of just kind of like, grow up,
wh-
man. Like, how do you think the world
no, no, no.
operates?
What it comes down to, for all the voices calling for just stop the fighting, stop the
Yeah.
war, stop the killing. What right have we got to tell a sovereign nation and its people who've been savagely invaded, bombed to smithereens, people slaughtered, children kidnapped, to tell them, well, just negotiate, negotiate. And I think I've mentioned this before. What if, hypothetically speaking, communist China invaded our West Coast
Yeah.
and took over Washington State, Oregon, California, maybe a slice of the West Coast. And we're fighting to liberate those areas from the Chinese. And some other country from somewhere comes in and says, "Well, you really ought to negotiate. I mean, you really ought to sit down and negotiate your sovereign territory
Yeah.
with the enemy that has invaded. And oh, by the way, just tell um, Idaho and Montana and Colorado and what's else there, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, you'll be fine. Just
Just
calm
let
down. You're
them
going to be
fall.
fine. We're just going to negotiate. We're just going to negotiate California,
Yeah.
Idaho, and Oregon.
Yeah.
How would that? I mean,
Well,
does
it's
anybody think about that?
Well,
Probably not.
it's the same thing I've said as, everyone that's mad at Israel. I'm like, you can't just have an October 7th and then tell them to
Yeah.
stop. Just like I was like, yeah, imagine coming to America on September 12th and being like, hold your horses, we're gonna get the Bin Laden family on the phone. You'd be like, I just watched people jump out of the World Trade Center to their death. Like, respectfully, screw off. We're gonna bomb you. And that's another part is like I'm also very aware, and I hate to use this language because I sound like the very people I hate, but I'm also aware of like the privileged life I've lived. I mean, I'm a white guy who went to private Catholic school and was born in 1990 America. Like I've had a pretty sick ride. And that's another thing I try to be a little more humble about is, yeah, would my opinion be the same if I grew up in Kyiv or Tel Aviv? I I would imagine I would be a little more sympathetic to them. So that's just kind of a critique of myself. Just again thinking aloud, but a critique of
Well,
myself.
let's
It's like,
extend that, to other Americans. Let them
sure,
think like you're thinking.
sure, yeah, no, it's yeah, and it's I've done that a million times with this podcast. Is it never feels good to be wrong and admit you're wrong, but it always leads to a better place. I think personally. Um, but for right now, not gentlemen, gentlewomen. We've been running for a little, actually, yeah, a little over an hour, so we wrap it up. But
Wow, we have.
thank you so much for doing this together. I wanted to put the two and two together, and I think it
Thank
worked
you for
perfectly.
putting us together.
Yes,
Thank you very
ma'am.
much.
Thank you both for showing up here. And
And thank you, Mitzi, for joining in. We'll share info and we'll talk some more.
oh yeah,
I would
So
that plus I'm feeling so good that oh my gosh, I've admired you for so long, Claire. And I got to talk with you.
thank you. Thank you.
it's part of
Well,
the.
there are things that perhaps we can do together, and I can help support you.
Yeah,
That's what I would like to do.
I'll text you both after this. We'll
Please.
put you in touch.
Thanks, Tommy.
But guys, everybody, thank you
All
so much
right.
for watching. I'm banned from Twitter, and I don't think Mitzi's on Twitter, so go in the description and follow Claire on Twitter. And yeah, I'll put you two in touch. And thank you again for both of y'all's time. Thank you for coming on here and letting me run my mouth too. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you for watching. Till next time, God bless everybody. Thank you for watching.